Welcome to this edition of Safety First. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. Today we're talking about a very important topic, hurricanes and hurricane season. The 2017 hurricane season doesn't officially start until June 1st, but we've already had some activity out there in the tropics, so again, it's never too early to be talking about this very important topic. And to help us talk about this topic, we have the Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Suffolk, Richard Stevens, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about hurricane season 2017. Every year, I know you have the National Weather Service and all these different organizations that kind of review what the trends are looking like, what the long-term forecasts. So what does, in general, the long-term forecast look like for the 2017 season?
Well, regardless of who you listen to, whether it's Colorado State University or AccuWeather or the Weather Channel, they're all predicting a below-average season this year.
Okay.
They're predicting 10 to 11 named storms, 5 which are major, above Category 3,
Right.
and 3 storms, 3 hurricanes to hit the continental U.S., make landfall. It's important not to get wrapped up in the predictions, though, because it only takes one.
That's right.
And the season for preparedness is year-round.
That's right. And I think when we talk about these storms and you think, well, man, 10 to 11 named storms, that's a lot. But some of these never approach land. Like you said, it's only maybe a handful they're talking about doing it. But that's a prediction. And as you said, it only takes one storm to be a bad one, and then we forget about any prediction or anything that's going on, correct?
That's correct. They're relying on El Nino out in the Pacific, and basically what that is warm water in the Pacific creates upper wind flow to the east, which shears off the formation of some of those storms, and they're counting on that developing to help reduce the chances of the hurricanes this year.
We got our fingers crossed. So
yes, sir.
Again, we hope to talk about preparing for something that won't happen, but again, preparations are the key, I think, at this point, as we're just starting to kind of start getting into or getting closer and closer to the official start of the season. But weather will do what weather will do, as we all know. So when people are talking about or thinking about preparing, what are some of the things they need to consider? Because I know everyone has their own individual needs, be it taking medicines or doing this or doing that. When we start talking about evacuations and evacuation planning and an evacuation kit. So if you could kind of run through really what you would suggest the average, or really forget average, any family needs to consider when it comes to hurricane preparedness.
Well, like I said, the time to start preparing is year-round. So with the hurricane season upon us, you really need to start preparing now if you haven't done so already. And what that entails is having an emergency plan in place for you and your family. One of the key components of that is if you're told to evacuate, to listen to those warnings and do evacuate. And with that comes several different components. You want to have phone numbers for all your family, all your loved ones on hand. And you want to have 2 evacuation sites, one locally here if you have to leave your house, and one out of town if you have to leave the area. And of course, Suffolk has the shelters that they can evacuate to as well. Correct. Along with that, you want to review your insurance policies now. It's important to remember that most damage from hurricanes and storms come from flood, from water damage. And your homeowner's insurance policies don't cover flood insurance. So that's something you have to get separate. And to keep in mind, you have to have that 30 days prior to it going into effect.
Right.
And with that, also renters. A lot of people who rent don't think about it as well, but if the landowner has insurance on the property, it's up to the renters to have insurance on their belongings. So now's the time to look into all that, get your paperwork straight. It's important to have a plan, a kit for your plan.
That's right.
And with that kit is if you decide to shelter in place or stay at home during a storm and ride it out, so to speak.
Right.
You want to make sure you have plenty of water. The recommendations are 1 gallon per person per day for 3 days.
Got it.
And along with that comes food, canned food, non-perishable. But along with that, you want to have a can opener. You don't want to have non-perishable food and not be able to get into it.
That's right.
Also, first aid kit's important. Flashlight with extra batteries. And a radio, a battery-powered radio or a hand crank radio, so you can listen to weather alerts and get updates as the storm progresses.
So really it's a matter of thinking about, okay, this is going to happen regardless of where we're told to evacuate to, in the sense that we do have a coastal evacuation or anything else going on. Kind of getting an idea about geography, especially if you're new to the area, so you understand how that's going to work. You talk about the kit, again, whether you're sheltering in place or you're having to go to a shelter or have to evacuate or something, you don't want to be on the roadway or have to go somewhere and not have those essentials. And I think that's the thing of and of course, if you have a kit from previous years, is to think about updating some of the items in there, because some things may go bad.
That's correct.
And or maybe they're non-perishable, but maybe they still have a shelf life.
Correct.
What is the suggestion though when they talk about your bottled water or depending on how you have it in bottles or jugs or whatever, how often should you change it out given the nature of the packaging and things for that? I mean, is that something that we need to change every year? Or I know some of them have, I guess, do they still have expiration dates on this?
Water does have expiration
Okay.
date on it if it's bottled water.
Okay.
And you can use that as a guide.
Right.
But you don't want to wait till a storm comes and realize that it's out of date.
Right.
So it's easy to remember to change your smoke detector batteries, twice a year and so forth.
Right.
Well, do the same thing with your emergency kit. Change it twice a year, dates that you can remember. Change your water.
Right.
If you have canned tuna fish, eat that tuna fish and replace it with some other or whatever the case may be.
Gotcha.
But you want to have fresh items there and ready to go.
And the same thing also would apply for medicines that you keep in there. So if you're on prescription medication or having some supplies in the sense that you need that for your own personal care, to make sure those things are kept up to date with expiration dates or whatever as well, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You want to have your prescription medicines up to date. If your storm's coming, you want to go ahead and get those refilled if possible. But the main thing is have a list of your medications, because if you have to leave and you run out, at least you'll have a list with the correct dosage on it.
Correct.
And you can get it somewhere else, hopefully, in the event of a storm.
What do you think is the biggest thing when people are thinking about preparedness that they might leave out? Is there any one thing that, I forgot that, or whether it's knowing if you're in a flood zone or knowing information that you have to have versus or including physical things as well? Do you find things that kind of crop up?
It's several items personally that people often overlook, especially if they're wait till the last minute to prepare and they're liable to forget something.
Sure.
But one thing you want to keep in mind is your pets. You want to make sure your pets are taken care of, because that can place a tremendous burden on the city pet shelters. I touched a little bit on shelters, but one thing to remember is our pet-friendly shelter is Nansemond River High School.
That's right.
So if you have to evacuate to one of our shelters, Nansemond River High School would be the one you would evacuate with your pets.
Got it.
The other two high schools are also Kings Fork and Lakeland are also evacuation shelters.
But not pet. They don't accept
But not
pets.
pet.
Got
Correct.
It. Okay.
Now, touching base on shelters a little more, if you have a medical need that requires electronics, kidney dialysis, something like that, our Kings Fork evacuation shelter is fully generated for the whole building, where Nansemond River and Lakeland generators power the cafeteria and the main areas, but not the whole school.
Okay. And in the event, I guess, that we would have an evacuation, certainly we'll be getting information out to let people know what shelters are open and reminding them again about what shelter serves what purpose as far as when you're looking at pets or, again, those medical needs that you talked about with the generator. You said that's at Kings Fork, is that correct?
Well, all the shelters have generators, but Kings Fork's fully generated.
That's what I mean. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yes,
sir. So, and of course, we do have limits on the amount of people being accepted each one. So again, I'm sure.
Yes, there are limits. The key to remember is stay informed.
Right.
Listen to your radio, listen to your officials, and do what they ask you to do. And you should be safe. We work on getting information out as early and as often as possible, as you know.
Sure.
So just stay informed and listen to your radio or television.
And I think you brought up an interesting point that people also may forget about, the insurance policy. You think, well, I'm covered, I'm good. But you don't think about the fact that that may be wind damage in some respects, right? But like you said, the flooding is one of the things.
Correct.
If you get any kind of a tidal surge or anything like that, or just a deluge of rain that floods up there, and that can happen whether you're in a hurricane or not.
Correct.
As unfortunately we found out in the city of Suffolk with some of the recent weather events that we've had with different areas. But the thing is knowing that, again, that homeowner's policy or the renter's policy may not cover or doesn't cover the flood part of it. So you need to consider, again, where you are. Are you in an area that's prone to flooding? And even if you're not, still considering that type of coverage as well. And I guess you need to talk with the insurance agent about that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And make ssure your whole policy's up to date and current to cover your belongings.
Sure.
Over the years, you accumulate different items in your house, valuables and so forth, and you want to make sure your policy covers that.
And again, when you're putting together the evacuation kit or preparing to evacuate when it gets down to crunch time, don't you pretty much want to put those type of documents and records in a waterproof type container, correct?
Correct.
For transport,
yes, you can go out and you can purchase waterproof containers, or you can simply use a Ziploc bag for documents like car titles, insurance policies, doctors' prescriptions, things of that nature, just to keep them dry, and then put those in a container with your kit.
And of course the kit, whether it's hurricane season or not, it still would be something, because again, if you have to evacuate for any other kind of weather related or any kind of issue at all, it's a good thing to have anyway, just really an emergency preparedness kit as well.
Correct. That's why I say the season for preparedness is year round, because it's not just during hurricane season.
That's right.
It's during any time of the year, whether it's a nor'easter or not.
That's correct. And of course the thing is, if we've been, I'll use the word lucky, knock on wood or something. In the last couple of years we've done okay with hurricane season as far as what the impacts have been. But as we've said, it only takes one, and sometimes we get lulled into that, it's not going to happen this year. They predict it every year, it doesn't come up, but that one storm changes everything.
It only takes one, and if one person's affected, then it's important to that individual.
That's right.
That they were affected by the storm. So it doesn't matter if the whole city's affected or not. If one person is affected, then the city is affected.
You're right. You're right. Especially when it comes to disaster recovery and handling all those processes and things that we have to go through there. Yes. And speaking of that, again, we noted off the top, Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator with the City of Suffolk. Talk a little bit about what you do and what your role is within the fire department and for the city to help us get prepared and be thinking, because again, you're not just sitting there waiting for something to happen. You're preparing, you're getting trained, you're making sure the information is out there and all these things are the plans are in place and everything's ready to go. But talk about what your role is for the City of Suffolk.
Well, you're correct. I've been out, this is a prime example, getting the word out to the public about preparedness.
Yes.
Whether it's talking to a civic league, whether it's going to a school, my main goal is educate the public on how to be prepared, how to recover, and how to weather a storm, so to speak. So that's my main goal, is to get the word out to the public and make sure that they have as much information and are covered as the best as possible.
Got it. And it's a very important thing, because again, in those times of crisis, we're looking to people, we're looking to organizations like the City of Suffolk, Suffolk Fire and Rescue, Emergency Management Division, to make sure that we know what's going on for our area, because again, Hampton Roads, the way it's configured, what might be working in one community or might be happening in one community might not be in another, or may be more pervasive. So knowing not just what the region's going through, but what we're going through here in the City of Suffolk.
Correct. And as you touched on earlier, there's all kinds of emergencies that affect the city.
Right.
Whether it's a hazmat incident, whether it's a tornado, whether it's a hurricane, active shooter, it's all part of it. A pandemic, that's all part of emergency management, and it's all what we have to be prepared for. Whether it's reviewing a private company's emergency operation plan or going over the city's emergency operation plan, making sure it's updated, is something that we have to do year round.
Exactly. Now, as far as with the preparations and things that are going on, we talked a little bit about, are you in a flood zone or are you not? Is that something that they could contact your office to talk about and review some of the FEMA maps and things that are laid out for that, so people can find out?
Well, they don't necessarily have to contact my office. They can go to the website, and there's an interactive website on the city's emergency management site where they can see if they're in a flood zone. Or simply contact their insurance company, and they'll be able to recommend whether they need flood insurance or not. Make sure they're covered.
That's even better, because again, you can pinpoint, and we'll make sure we put that web address up on the screen during this program so people can kind of know where to go to that. So again, we've got a few minutes left here, but just want to recap again. Regardless of the timing, but again, now is it's kind of like changing those batteries in the smoke detectors. We talk about do it when the time changes, but really it's something you need to monitor year round and test and everything. Same thing goes for preparedness for emergencies or disasters like a hurricane or something. You should always be prepared, but if we're going to key in on it right now, let's hit those big points as far as what people need to be doing now if it hasn't already been done. Okay,
now make sure your insurance policies are up to date. Make sure you have your emergency kit put together. And you can go to readyvirginia.gov, and they'll have a full list of items you can have. But it's also important to remember that it's personalized. You have your own personal needs, and you will make sure your kit has those needs in it. You want to make sure if you're doing construction, make sure everything is shored up this time of year. Try to get projects going and try to get them done in a timely manner. Don't put off finishing them. And then listen to your public address, listen to your officials, and heed what they say.
Okay, we appreciate it, and we're hoping this season is a quiet one, and but if not, but again, we want to make sure everyone's prepared regardless of what the circumstances would be, correct?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Very good. Well, Richard, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Tim.
Appreciate your time. That would do it for this edition of Safety First. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. We'll see you next time.